Welcome to the Research Like a Pro question and answer series. I'm Nicole Dyer, and today we have an excerpt from our Research Like a Pro office hours about thinking through writing research reports in genealogy. And in this tip, I was telling our online course members about the thinking and analysis and correlation that happens when writing research reports. And before I started writing reports, I didn't realize how amazing it was to be able to gain so many insights into the records and the research I had been doing by putting it together into a written format. So this tip is all about how we think when we write and how that helps us with our conclusions. So I hope you enjoyed this tip about writing research reports, and we'll talk to you next time. Tonight, the theme of office hours is writing research reports, and I wanted to share the quote that I sent out in the newsletter earlier this week to tell you about office hours. And I saw it in Paul Graham's article in the Association of Professional Genealogists Quarterly from last month. And he said, writing time is thinking time. And his article was about reasonably exhaustive research and focused on, as a professional genealogist, how do you know when you've done enough, and trying to manage your time because the clients are paying for each hour of your time. And then also, how do you try to meet that expectation or genealogy standard of reasonably exhaustive research, which those two can often be in conflict. In order to get to reasonably exhaustive, we would have to spend so many more hours usually than the client wants to spend. Well, within that article, he talked about how important it is to make sure that we spend enough time writing and working on the research report because writing time is thinking time. And that really resonated with me because I have found that as I do writing for my research, that's when I start to put all the puzzle pieces together and really come to some valuable conclusions, especially when you're working with indirect evidence and you don't have direct answers to your research questions. So ponder on this. Do you incorporate enough thinking / writing time? And are we spending that time to ponder, to think, to work out the details of what we've found? And probably the best way to do that is to sit down and write it out. So here are some tips for how you can write more during your research process. And really, the Research Like a Pro process helps us do this because at all assignments as we go along, there's some writing to do. So for example, when you have finished your timeline, one of the things that I've started doing that we kind of encourage you to try is to write the background information for your research report at that time. So the starting point analysis or the summary of what you know at the beginning of the project. That's what I mean by the background information. And after you've put all that into your timeline, it's fresh in your mind. And what better time is there to have some thinking time and write about what you know at the start of a project? And as you do that, you start to get some ideas for what you need to do next. And that's good preparation for your research planning. And then another important piece that helps you plan for research plan, helps you with your research plan is the locality guide assignment. And as you're writing a paragraph in your report about locality information, you could actually even do that sooner than the report writing phase. You can do it right after you've done your locality research. And that's when it's fresh in your mind and you found a bunch of information about the locality. And you can quickly put in a paragraph or two that tells about what the locality was like at that time and place, put in a map, put information about extant records, if anything's been lost, record loss, and that kind of thing. Then as you're doing your research plan, you have a chance to write your hypothesis. And sometimes during the research plan, that's where you could write your background information too. So either of those two assignments. And the hypothesis is a chance for you to really write down what you think maybe happened, the answer to your research question in hypothesis form. Maybe this person was the parent. Maybe the parent was somebody whose name I don't know yet, but somebody who lived in Virginia from 1750 to 1780. And that's your hypothesis. And as you write it out, you get ideas. for your research plan. Then while you're following your research plan and you're writing as you go, you can do all kinds of writing to help you think. And one of the main things we do as we find an important document is to make an abstract or a transcription of that document. And how often do we actually spend some time to analyze the contents of that in written form and put that into our research log or in our research project document? Are we just quickly making a citation and moving on, or are we really diving deep into that record and trying to understand its contents and what it's telling us and all the clues within it? I like to write out bullet points for analysis and just put, the name was written this way and this is evidence of blah, blah, blah. Another thing you can do as you find new records in your plan is make note of correlations between the records. And as you go along, you might start to notice the same associates or relatives are mentioned on the same records. And that's a good time to make a note of that in your research log or write down a paragraph in your report about that. You can also write intermediate conclusions into your report as you go along. Maybe on the second part of your research plan, you make a conclusion about something. And if you have found a couple pieces of evidence, you can go ahead and write about them at that time. Then you can come back to your report when you've finished your plan and revise and edit as needed. So I like to think of this writing time is thinking time as I'm going through the Research Like a Pro process and try to incorporate more writing and thinking time into each assignment. So hopefully that will give you some ideas for how to get going with writing even before you get to the research report assignment.